Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes, and welcome back to the YoVideogames podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
And once again, thank you to all our generous patrons who kept us going for over 350 episodes.
Yeah, if you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week is Justin S. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
And as always, we have a sponsor to thank. Of course, we're talking about Manscaped. Is it still technically fall? Is it fresh ball fall?
Or it's fresh ball fall until the 21st of December. Winter. No, weed whack in winter is not for at least another month of this recording.
I don't know if that's going to be their thing, but I'm trying to call.
You won't have to weed whack this winter if you keep your balls fresh through the fall. Brings
us, of course, to the Lawnmower 4.0. It's the perfect time of year to give this as a gift. Works in the shower. Is great for travel, has a travel mode for everyone who's traveling for the holidays. It's one of our favorite products by them, but of course our two favorite products, the products that we use most often, are the Boxers 2.0, very comfortable. I'm wearing some right now, and the Crop Preserver, another great thing for travel. Keep your balls smelling fresh. Great for being in the gym or after gym. Really, honestly, you shouldn't wear it before the gym.
Yeah, colder months are coming, so you're going to be working out, and you're going to be causing a sweat in your taint. So you don't want that to just be fermenting. As you go to work, you go to school, you do whatever you got to do. So that's why you got that. You also got an anytime spritz with the Crop Reviver, which is basically the same thing as a lotion, but just in a handy dandy spritzer version.
Spritz. Oh, it's in my gym bag. Damn it, I'm an idiot.
Because you go to the gym like a smart man.
I do. They also have a deodorant that is the same scent profile as the ball cream and everything else.
Right. Now that's for your yeah, exactly. That's for your pits, not your balls, because they're two different types of things.
I was trying to think of something that rhymes with pits, and there was nothing. Couldn't get...
whatever happens at this holiday season, remember, you want to be a smooth criminal sliding, having someone slide down your chimney. You don't want them to have to spend a night in the woods. I don't care how much you love musicals. So
all of these make amazing stocking stuffers, and if you're brave, they can be white elephant gifts for your friends or family members. I gave my father-in-law Manscaped products last year. It was weird. It got a little awkward. We held eye contact. He wasn't sure if I was joking, but if you're interested in checking out any of these products, please head over to manscaped.com. Use our code YoVG, that's all caps, for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. That's code YoVG, all caps, at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. Your balls will thank you.
Damn right.
So we're doing it. It's sort of a lulling time of year. We're gonna do.
I call it another calm before the storm.
Right. We're going to do another best of, as we do, like what our favorite things we played this year are, but it's still too early. It's too early. Callisto Protocol's coming and the paywall thing's fucking weird, but I just
wanted to say, like, some people I feel are jumping the gun. Like, Time put out a fucking top 10 list, and this fucking dude played like nothing all year. Like, The Quarry was like his number 3 game. Like, Resident Evil 8 DLC was number 9. Like, I'm shitting. I don't even know who this guy is. Maybe it's a woman. I don't know. But like, I'm shitting on.
Surprised with The Quarry.
I am just shitting on this Time magazine article because everyone kind of had a good laugh at it. He put it above Elden Ring, or whoever.
He put The Quarry above Elden Ring?
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So that's a paid for list, right?
Maybe. It wasn't number 1, but like one was like God of War or some shit or something.
Oh, well, of course. Yeah. I mean, God of War is the ultimate in video game movie going technology.
Right.
I really enjoy God of War, but it's a movie, right?
It's have you beaten it yet?
I'm right on the last push, but I know what happens.
Okay. So like, it's a movie. It's like or a mini or a long series or whatever. It's good.
It's great. Everybody gets their moment. But it's a movie.
And again, like you were saying, Callisto Protocol is about to come out this week.
Real amp for that. Although I'll be honest, the edge got taken off when I found out that they're putting like death animations behind a paywall. What the fuck?
Oh yeah, and I think the director had to come out and say like, no, these are not things we've done. It's things we're gonna do.
Oh, it's like a new additional DLC stuff for
Right,
later.
yeah. Like apparently the director had to come out and like basically tell people like, no, this is not stuff we've done already and we're putting behind. It's like it's stuff we thought you would appreciate us working on, rather
Okay.
than hey, give me some tchotchke or give me a new hat. It's like, well, what if we spent time making new death animations? So I can kind of get
That
behind it
is
a little
okay.
bit, where it's like, okay, like I
Way
want to
more
add
understandable.
I want to add content to the game in a different way, in a more meaningful way than a keychain hanging off the gun or something.
Right. That's way better than what I was thinking. To be fair, I did not read a full article. I only read the headline and then got mad about it. I am that bitch.
I feel like the poor guy kind of like had like this really cool idea and kind of got crucified because it reads poorly.
It doesn't look great. My first mistake, of course, was reading the tweet thread. Whatever. I read the fucking thread and I didn't read the actual article, and so I only got half the story. Read the goddamn article, kids. That's what we're learning today. Andrew's an asshole. But still, that is better. Although, paywalls are always fucking. I don't know. I'm annoying, but we're not talking about that shit. We're doing an evergreen episode today, mostly because we got hit in the nostalgia nuts. You did an Atari Flashback. Haha, episode title right there. Like an Atari Flashback where you went through and you
Yeah,
played a bunch of the games from the 70s and 80s, or just the 70s?
all the way up to 94. I mean, I got the
God
director.
damn.
I found the director's quote if you want to know. To be clear, we are not holding anything back from the main game for the season pass. We haven't even started work on this content yet. It's all new stuff that we'll be working on in the new year. Fans have even asked for even more deaths, so we're making it a priority next year.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's not upsetting at all.
So they literally were trying to take fan feedback, like, hey, let's do this for more content.
Oh yeah,
People want this. How dare you hold stuff back?
some
What?
asshole journalist saw that and was just like, "I've got you now. Finally, the clicks are mine."
Fuck, I hate how accurate that is.
There's something that someone tweeted me once where they were just like, I really appreciate that you guys don't do clickbait titles. And I was like, that is because we are lazy. We don't think of the most clickbait titles. I feel like
That's an insult because I try to make them clickbait.
most of the time we just try to do something that describes the content of the episode. And it was harder in older episodes where we had like 8 topics,
I've failed my job.
You did. You fucked up. You're a bad YouTuber. You're a boo-tuber. I'm not proud of that.
I think here I am thinking I got this is a good title. This is like, this is intriguing. People want to know, and it's like, man, like
but clickbait isn't the same as a good title, like intriguing title.
I didn't have some like kicked in the fucking nuts expression on my face going ooh, and I didn't put a fucking circle, blur out the rest of the image, and then put a big yellow arrow pointing on something, and then in big fucking caps and exclamation mark, you won't believe.
We should start doing that for every episode. I think every listener is with me on this. We should do that. I'll send you some high quality pictures of me being surprised, like or like what's it like like devastated, just
oh, this made me cry.
Or like raging. One of my favorite ones is when you see people like and it's like dude goes to church, but just
throw up the horns.
Amazing. But no, I like Atari Flashback, so that's what I'm gonna name the episode.
I mean, I think that was literally the name of the little like plug and play things they sold at malls and shit.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there was definitely a game collection called the Atari Flashback at some point.
Yeah. So they just had another big collection come out, and it's actually a very, very, very well done. You're gonna, if you're on the YoVideogames channel on YouTube, you're gonna see this coming out right pretty soon after this episode. Because I'm rendering them now, rendering them. But they had the Atari 50th anniversary collection come out, and it's very cool. They have like this very neat like virtual museum like timeline. They have all these different ways you can view it. It's like, you can just go to the game list, but then they have like this sort of like year by year breakdown of what was going on in Atari's corporation's history, and then you just go through the history. You'll see videos, commercials, interviews. They have like here, click on a bunch of flyers, arcade flyers, poster, original artwork made for the game, stuff like that, photos of the cabinets. Here's the game, and you just play the game. It's very cool. I love. I think it was Digital Eclipse who did it. I love how they put it together. I think it was fantastic. And there's a button to make it real. Just give me the game list.
That reminds me of one of my favorite things of physical games that I wish they would start doing for like special editions. You remember, like, especially in those older games, or like all the way up until the N64 era, you'd get like a poster of the game folded up in the box.
Mhm.
You know, like Atari had big
Yeah.
posters, like doing retro hand-drawn type art for a poster, like the old school movie posters, but for the game that you're buying. Like imagine like a
Mhm.
Resident Evil 8 Village poster
See,
done in that style. Like
that's the
that's a
thing.
good
And
special edition.
there's a lot of things I could talk about that I think I actually like about Atari. And we had this discussion, on Max's stream, and we were split, right? Where Max did not like the wood finish look of Atari consoles. Kenny
Get the
loved
fuck
it.
out of here. What?
Kenny loved it.
That's how you know it's high quality when
I
electronics are paneled
kind
in
of
wood.
I kind of like it, but I also think it would look stupid if it was like if you tried to make a modern one. I don't know.
No, get the fuck out of here. A wood paneled PS5?
Mhm.
Hell yeah, that'd be sick as fuck. Retro as hell looking.
Shape of that console, a wood paneled Series S, I think would look better than because it already looks like a fucking stereo. Imagine if it had like a wood finish and it really looked like a fucking
That would
like
look
old
cool
home
too, but like
stereo.
you could totally do a like a modern, not it's not modern, mid-century. You could do a mid-century style version of the PS5 in wood, and it would look sick as fuck. For everyone who doesn't know what mid-century is, it is
I do know,
usually
but
it's usually
the shape of the PS5 as it is so dumb already.
right, yeah, but they could do a mid-century version of it that would look cool as hell. Like kind of like
It
a
almost does.
Q version.
It almost does look mid-century, honestly, with the way it's crazy angles. It looks like the back of a fucking Chevrolet or something, or
Yeah, if it had a
Impala or
different
something.
footing, like if
I
it
don't
had
know.
a mid-century footing, I'd like it more.
My dad could tell you. I literally showed my dad a picture from Empire magazine of the set of Indiana Jones 5, where he's running through the streets of Manhattan,
Mhm.
and there's a bunch of period piece cars because the scene is supposed to take place on a very specific day, 1969. And my dad looks at this photo. I'm like, Dad, what are these cars? And he literally goes, so that's in a 59 Impala, blah, 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 this model, that model. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you, Dad?
He was a mechanic for fucking
His life, yeah.
yeah,
He has a weird fucking. There was one he couldn't guess because there wasn't enough info or detail. It's like too many cars did the same thing. I can't it was like like a chunk of a car in the frame, but like he can tell you if he sees the back of any car from about 50 to 69, he can tell you what make, model, year.
I love all nerddom, so I think that's
He
cool as
is
hell. I just don't give a
is
fuck about cars.
well, neither do I, but I'm like, it's just funny to me because like we're watching, and here's a fun one. We were watching Enemy of the State, Gene Hackman, Will
Amazing.
Smith,
Yeah.
and there's this thing where the guy puts the footage of the senator who had the guy killed by the lake, and he puts it on a cartridge, and then the cartridge is like Will Smith is running around. At one point, he has to try to get it back from his kid, and my dad goes, "What kind of game system is that?" I'm like, "It's a Turbo Express."
You are your
NEC.
dad, but for obscure consoles.
Turbo Express NEC, came out, early 90s, was kind of like an attempt to sort of make a portable, rival, but it didn't pan out much, probably why they're using it. That it's just like
Wow.
yeah, I'm not a nerd. So, but that's this collection is great for that because it actually it shows that, and I want to go back to what you said earlier. The early art, the 70s art for Atari games,
Yeah.
whether it was arcade or home. Actually, well, the arcade flyers were pretty fucking sexist, but it was the 70s. You
70s
should
is
see
a weird time.
well, you should see the poster for Atari's Gotcha. Just look at it. Look at that right now.
I'm Googling that shit.
Atari Gotcha arcade flyer. But like there are 2600 art in particular for the cartridges.
Looks like a porno.
Yep. It sure does, doesn't it?
That's funny as fuck. I mean, that's Is she in pajamas? Is she in like a negligee? Like what the fuck?
I don't know, dude. You have to ask our boomer ass parents who played this shit.
It does straight up look like he's trying to like. Wow, that's
And
incredible.
this is not the underground stuff, like Custer's Revenge or anything like that. This is like official Atari stuff.
Amazing.
But
Everybody should get that.
I gotta say, the artwork for the original Atari cartridges was fantastic. It was that hand drawn movie poster style.
Yeah.
Not Drew Struzan yet, not quite that level, but like 60s, 70s style drawn movie posters.
It
And I
has that
kind of
like Technicolor feel where like there's
yeah.
bold circles and
Mhm.
oval, like bold shapes with bold colors, primary
And
colors, shit like
and
that.
I kind of love it
I do
in a
too.
weird
Yeah.
sort of way. Like it's funny because like the games are such it's just it's a series. It's a very small amount of rectangles and squares slowly moving across the screen. Like the games are bullshit, but like they
Right.
have such detailed, like imaginative artwork on the
Yeah.
covers, and I actually kind of love it. Um,
Oh,
and that's the thing is I kind of feel like with this episode I'd like to talk about the things that are both great and awful about Atari in a way, but like I do still miss um that hand-drawn look. Like if you ever just go and look at like Drew Struzan's like Twitter page or just look up his art in general, and you're just kind of reminded how like all of the 80s and early 90s, a lot of movies just had like this unique drawn posters for all their movies.
like Missile Command.
Missile Command is great. That's got a
Yeah.
great drawn box art. And yeah, I actually do really love that stuff. Like this is the thing is like look, we're old, but we're not that old.
I'm young. I'm beautiful. Stop it.
We're not old enough to remember this stuff being new or even on the market.
Right.
By the time we were cognate, cognate enough to even remember what's on a shelf, Atari was long gone. So we don't have a memory of this stuff ever really being a thing.
I don't remember where the fuck it was, but I have this distinct memory of being in a den. I feel like this was in like Lake Havasu.
Oh, it's
Arizona.
well, it's a den. If Atari is, it equals
Right.
dens, right?
Shag orange carpeting. One of those TVs that had like a dial, and it was like a wooden box that had the TV in it, and you had the dial, and like it had some buttons too. But playing an Atari, and it must have been like a great aunt or something had a
It was my grunkle.
Yeah, I had a bunch of the original boxes for Atari games. Like I must have had like 20 or 30 Atari games or some shit, but all in their original boxes and stuff. And I have this distinct memory where I can visualize playing on it with the fucking stick with the single button and shit. And that is the only memory I have of playing Atari games on an actual Atari 2600. Like I've played emulated versions and stuff.
Oh yeah, everyone
and
has
collections and stuff, but I have that memory, and I can't eat it's that. And I remember not being used to like the heat of Arizona and getting sick because I didn't drink enough water for Arizona. And so I threw up on shag carpeting.
So it wasn't coming out. There's
Yeah.
there's pieces of your meal in there to this day.
That shit's gone. A part of me lives in that house now. But I think I was like maybe 8. I don't know. I can't remember how old I was, but like it's one of those weird memories where like it's probably several memories melding together. I don't know.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, I really like the fact that like it's somehow related to that like the house is like also like a time capsule.
It's also old as shit. Yeah.
Yeah. So
well, everything in the 70s, right? Everything was browns and oranges, shag carpeting,
greens, earth tones,
and like wood paneling.
Wood paneling. I don't know. I still give my mom shit for it to this day. Like, what the fuck are you thinking?
Yeah, what was wrong with you in the 70s?
What was wrong with you guys? And shag carpeting, shag everything. Like,
well,
I feel I can say this because we're sponsored by Manscaped. But if there ever was a good excuse for a time machine, we'd be to go back in time and reintroduce our boomer ass parents to some manscaping and be like,
look, what they did with their genitals, I don't ever want to think about. So just
you
leave it
would
alone.
never see it because it probably looked like a Duck Dynasty beard on everyone down there.
Now, I will say one thing for shag carpeting. Super comfortable to sit and lay down on. You know, when you're doing your twister or your orgies. I mean, sure, you're not getting semen out of shag carpeting, but if you were smart enough to have the twister mat be where you were having your orgy, you get all the softness.
I'm just
And
trying
none
to
of the
think of how
mess.
they got to that point. I think it was just a reaction because like
Boomers
50s
grew
was
up in amazing excess.
right, and like the 50s was all about futuristic stuff, right? So, you know, you had this sort of almost Frank Lloyd Wright era of like everything being angular and minimalist and going heading towards like this
Brutalist.
right,
50s was
this
all about
future.
brutalism. Yeah. I'm one of the
Eh,
few people that actually likes brutalism. We're out there. There's
But I
like
mean, like
five of us.
you get to the point of the late '60s, early '70s, and everything sort of became very, you know, obviously the hippie movement and all that stuff. But like everything became very nature oriented, natural this, natural that. It's like
My favorite thing about the hippie movement is like when we think about it now, and when you talk to a boomer now, they're all like, "Yeah, we were all into free love and shit." Nah, it was a small niche. People fucking hated hippies in the '60s. Like it wasn't
really,
like,
really depends where you were in the country
oh sure,
because
yeah, but like it. My point is like uh, there's this weird. Every boomer was against the Vietnam War. Oh, we all marched. Right? Weird that it had the highest volunteer rate of any war in American history, including World War II.
you know what's funny is
Boomers were signing up like fucking crazy to go
you know what
there.
was a great is a great movie to sort of like sort of really give you a good time capsule look at what at really just post Vietnam War is the first Rambo. People think Rambos are dumb action flicks, not the first one.
The first one was, yeah, like a thriller response to,
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's a very good look at just how people sort of kind of felt about and you know the war and people coming back from the war and blah blah blah. The speech Stallone gives at the end, he actually can act even if you can't understand him.
how dare you? Stallone can definitely act.
Richard Crenna and Sylvester Stallone scene at the end in that restaurant, you know, that where he's you know shot out the whole town or whatever, and it's like it's great kind of thing. Like it's like this, you know, the whole like they went off to war, they came back, and then people were like throwing shit at them and you know calling them baby killers and all this other stuff. It's part of
Right.
the line in the movie and stuff, and,
Right. Yeah.
and it's like the whole thing was just this fucking mess from,
Yeah.
from
But
every
anyway,
angle. But it's a good time. It's a good time capsule.
the '70s
Um,
were fucking wild, is what we're getting at.
Yeah, it's kind of you know funny that
Everything was ranch houses and too
that
much
just
goddamn
reminded it just
space.
reminded me of Tarantino's latest thing that he pissed everyone off. Where he's just like, with the '50s and the '80s and now are the worst decades for cinema. I don't know if you saw that quote for him.
Really? He said
Which
the '50s and the '80s?
'50s, '80s is like you know
Well,
right now he says besides the '50s and the '80s, this is the worst era for film right now.
he fucking loves the '70s, just in general. He
I
loves
know, which is what
because he
hit
was
me
a
because we're talking about
kid.
'70s here. I'm like, Tarantino is such this huge fanboy of the '70s, and it's always a good argument to argue which was a better decade for film, the '70s or the '80s. And I argue the '80s, but I see where Tarantino's coming from because I see how much people are fucking like obsessed with '70s film and how
Well,
and there's a lot to digest there, of course.
so what year is it that Jaws came out?
'70s,
Yeah, Jaws was in the '70s. It was late '70s. I think it was like
late '70s,
'78.
'70s, '79.
I think it was yeah, 1975, so it was mid '70s. Um, I guess there's an argument to be made that the '70s was the last time that the Hollywood system wasn't based entirely around pure blockbuster
Yeah.
filmmaking. Like, the '70s is also the time when you had your Spielbergs, De Palmas, Lucases, you know, those that sort of like, I think they were called the not the Brat Pack, they were called like the um there was like they had a name that was a play off of the Rat Pack, but
Mhm.
for film students, where they sort of took over Hollywood in that decade, right? Where all these indie guys took over Hollywood. Spielberg was always a studio guy, but he invented the blockbuster. And a lot of the people that love '70s filmmaking fucking hate Spielberg because he killed artistry in Hollywood.
That's not fucking his fault people wanted to go see his movies instead of theirs.
No, it's not his fault that marketers saw big buck dollar signs when they looked at him. They also wouldn't let him make art films. Every time he tried, they shit on him until he made, I think it's like The Color Purple. He got shit on for The Color Purple, probably for a lot of good reasons. But then he made like Schindler's List in the what 90s? It was like early 90s.
93.
Yeah, and then everybody was like, "Oh, he's an artist too." Like, but before that, he was like like people would refer to Spielberg as an amazing filmmaker, but he makes schlock. And it's like you watch it now, and you're like, he's probably the best living filmmaker of all time. That fucking nerd, love him.
Well, well, it's kind of funny because it's like, well, like, yeah, he made it's like you can have high quality B movie.
Yeah,
You know, like
that's what Raiders of the Lost Ark is.
Ark is. It's just high quality B film.
Yeah, George Lucas was all like, "We're making a B movie, Steve. You can't go over budget." And he was also known for going over budget, so like no studio wanted to hire him for a schlock movie like Raiders. And he was like, "I won't let you down. I will not betray you," is what he told George Lucas. But yeah, the 70s is kind of a nostalgic end. 80s is where everything became about like the simple by the beats action movie, right? Like,
Yeah.
but that really matured into the 90s.
But I mean, like you look at, I mean, again, like it's a B film, but like Die Hard, as we talked about, has like one of the most perfect scripts ever written.
Oh, right. Yeah. But it is, Die Hard is also one of the movies that made the formula, right? Made the beat sheet, the thing you got to follow. 80s movies, I really would say like we associate 80s movies with like John Hughes and, you know, shit
John
like that.
Hughes and B movie stuff, you know,
Yeah.
like Spielberg, Lucas, and then
John Carpenter.
Hughes, and then we had some. I mean, but like, it's funny to think about it now, where it's like The Thing was considered a terrible film on its release, and now it's like it's the greatest horror movie ever made. It's like, well, yeah, it was.
It grew on people.
Yeah, it grew. Well, yeah, it grew on people. Where it's kind of like I couldn't imagine being around when The Thing, which is a remake of a 50s movie, comes out. And it's like this is like the fucking best fucking horror movie ever made, and then being totally fucking blown away. And all these people are like, it's disgusting, it's schlock, it's terrible. It's like,
I guess. I will say that one reason why Tarantino, and I haven't read his full statement, so I don't know, but one reason why he might be saying that it's the worst era for films is that films have become TV shows.
Yeah.
TV shows, like films are now not meant to be a standalone piece of art that may, you know, make you think about it and rewatch it. Films aren't even really meant to be rewatched anymore. They're meant to be watched, and then you watch the next 18 parts. Like
so
we are now in the era
like
of content.
I've seen every. I have not seen every Marvel movie, but of all the Marvel movies I've seen almost all of them exactly once.
I think I've rewatched Infinity War, but really, like, I haven't even rewatched Thor Ragnarok, or I would argue Thor Ragnarok's probably one of the most rewatchable ones.
Yeah, I think I've watched that, and maybe and then it's not related to MCU, but like Spider-Verse.
Oh yeah, I've seen Spider-Verse.
I've rewatched that, but it's like I most of these movies, most of the MCU I've seen exactly one time, and I don't feel like I missed anything.
Yeah, so I would argue that that's, if he's making that point, yeah, he's right. We are in the worst time for films. We're in the best time for content. Everything's content now, right? Like it's all, you know, you can get amazing content on YouTube. You can get amazing content, you know, basically anywhere right now. But is it a good time for movies? No, not really. Most movies, like Marvel doesn't make movies. They make long TV shows in a sequence and stuff, and they're good. I'm not shitting on them. They're fine. But you do also get things like Martin McDonagh's films like Banshees of Inisherin or The Nice Guys, or Nice Guys isn't Martin McDonagh, but point stands is like you do occasionally get something that really stands on its own merits. Drive. Although I'd argue that Drive is an art film that somehow broke into you know, the public persona, and then
there's no better example of that than the guy you went to go see that movie with, who hated it and you loved it.
Yeah. There's no why did they call it Drive? There's no chase. There's one chase scene. They're not even driving that much. It's like, well, That's not the point of the movie, man. But um yeah, I don't know. I think that's interesting. I wonder if that counts technically for video games too, because I would argue that we are in kind of the best era for video games. I, you know, sort of the opposite
That's
of
actually a really good question to
you
think about.
can't douche out video games anymore. It takes several years to pump them out. And when you get a blockbuster game, God of War,
Yeah.
right? It is. I don't know if God of War has replayability, if I'm being honest. Maybe the same thing
It
stands, right? You don't have a lot of replayability anymore.
it definitely has content.
Right.
And you can argue that you could replay it on a harder difficulty after doing it. But then there's people like Max who are just starting at the give me God of War difficulty.
Right.
So they're never and once they beat the game, they are never going to go back to it.
Right.
But
And a weird thing is like I replayed The Last of Us 2. I replayed The Last of Us 2 to one because I wanted to refresh my memory on the story, and two because I wanted to go back to it. I think once I had forgotten all the bullshit that was sprouting around it at the time. The first time I played it, there was all the controversy around it
mhm.
floating. And I think that colored the way I looked at it and the way I like judged Druckmann's writing and shit like that. And then when I replayed it, separated by years, I actually think it's better than when I played it the first time.
Mm.
Um, and I, but other than that, I can't think of a game that I've like replayed. I replayed, um, like Assassin's Creed Odyssey a little bit,
Mhm.
not a ton, but I can't think
That's
of a
on
game
Game
that there's
Pass
like
now. I should actually try it.
Assassin's Creed Odyssey's fun. One, if you really love the Mediterranean, it's beautiful. It's
But I
really
hate
great.
how Ubisoft games control though.
Yeah, well, can't help you with that. It is still an Ubisoft controlling game.
Ah.
But going back to like 70s
But
for
that's a good thing to talk about because that's all Atari games had to be. They all had to have massive replay value because they could only be a tiny little bite-sized chunk of a game. So it had to
right.
be something that was highly replayable.
Yeah, so is replayability like I guess that's what I was getting at is like is replayability the thing you're looking for in games these days, or are you looking for a blockbuster standalone experience? Because games today are all about blockbuster.
Blockbuster standalone experience. And,
Right.
and and if there is a market for that sort of like infinitely replayable short burst thing, it's on your phone.
Right. So
And
could you have an Atari type system anymore? Not like Super Meat Boy sort of had this similar, you're having
yeah,
fast game, you're moving and you're replaying it and stuff. But how many times have you gone back and replayed that?
I'm gonna play it at your place. So
Right. So it's like NES, I would even say up to probably the N64 era, maybe PS2 would be included in this. You kind of had to replay your games. Now there's a new game coming out, like Callisto Protocol is coming out this week, and I'm just
right,
barely finishing God of War.
absolutely.
Right? We're spoiled for big blockbuster games, but that also means you don't go replay. So I don't know if you could have Atari style games today where
There is an argument to be made, and I just discovered it actually. It's a sort of like indie boom darling that just came out. Of course, came from the indie side. It's on Game Pass. It costs $5 on Steam. It was on sale for a week for $3, and it's called Vampire Survivors.
Vampire
And
Survivors.
so it's this little 8-bit overhead game. You pick a character, and they attack automatically, right? And as you play the game, overhead, just zombies and ghosts just kind of like constantly like come after you. And you move around. All you do. You don't press a button to attack. It's auto attack, right? And as you kill them, they every time you kill something, it drops a gem. You collect a gem, your experience bar goes up, and when your experience bar reaches the end of the screen, you get a Hades style thing where you get here's 3 weapons randomly selected for you to either get an additional weapon, that'll automatically be thrown out, or upgrade the weapon you already have. Depends on what you get. It's 3 choices. Who knows what happens, right? And then you can get other enemies who will drop treasure chests, which might give you a freebie without having to level up, or 3 free upgrades.
That's cool.
And
Yeah.
this is there's like the game has like almost nothing presentation wise. There's a title screen and like a pick your character, and then you just go, right? And it's just a timer. You just see how long you can survive. right?
Huh.
You just move your character, and they'll automatically whip back and forth, or throw an axe, or throw holy water, or throw a ricocheting beam or something, whatever, right? Or throw fireballs that go in a direction, or knives. They just automatically do it. And then you get things like, oh, I make yourself faster. You can try to like earn things so you can buy permanent upgrades to your character.
Well,
Because like, oh,
it's a little bit like Snake was back in the day, right? You just go until you can't go anymore.
exactly.
Right.
So, and again, this is a $5 game. It's free on Game Pass, and it's the epitome of Atari style game design. It's just, you're just playing a game like Asteroids, where you're
You
just
just
kind of
go until you can't go anymore.
you're just shooting shit all around you, and you just go until you can't go anymore.
What do you think? What was the last true Atari game? Like
Excellent question. Like
in that
last,
same style,
okay, for the style, okay,
because Atari died in the 80s, but then like sort of kept limping on, right? They got bought. Who did they get bought back? Let me see if I can find
Infogrames. Well,
Infogrames.
there's a lot of history to go over there too. Like Atari split in the 80s into two entirely separate companies. One of them was owned by Time Warner, and they went on their separate ways and did separate things. And then eventually, I think one just kind of went out, and the other one eventually sold to Infogrames. And Infogrames use
Right.
the branding, the name recognition to rebrand themselves as Atari or whatever, but they're not really like not the Atari kind of thing.
Right. And they did like Driver and didn't they do like Roller Coaster Tycoon? I feel like that was
Yeah, because that's an Infogrames game.
yeah.
It was weird to actually see, like, there were Dragon Ball games with Atari branding on them.
Yeah, Dragon Ball Z Sagas. I just saw it right here.
Yeah. So, but it's not really the same company. That's Infogrames. That's not the Atari Corporation that
Right, because
was in
they did
California.
Enter the Matrix.
Correct.
That famously beautiful game. Wonderful game.
So yeah, like so if I'm thinking like, what's the last true Atari style game that
Is it
Atari
Gremlins
made?
in 1984 on the 2600?
There was a game, it's in the collection. I forget what it's exactly called, but Nolan Bushnell himself came back in like 89, 88, 89 to make an Atari 2600 game that was a little more advanced, a little more in depth, something that could compete with Nintendo's, depth, right, on the NES. Space something or other.
Well, they did like the Atari 5200, right?
So yeah,
But that was the same time.
There's that. That's actually early 80s. So there's Atari 2600, and then there's 5200, and then there's the 7800. And they're all kind of disastrous consoles, sadly. Like, I'm sorry, of the 52 and the 2600 was a huge success, but I'm talking about the 5200 and 7800. And they're fascinating because, like, the 5200 is better, but it barely feels like an upgrade. And there's almost no working original controllers for the system in existence any longer.
Well, didn't it look like a TV? Actually, I can pull up.
It looked like a giant VCR is what it looked like.
Yeah, right. But okay, yeah, the controller just looked like a TV remote. Like, yeah,
yes,
it had
correct.
a 1 through
Correct.
9, and then you had a little joystick. Yeah, God, that
which somehow survived to the Jaguar, that numeric keypad.
Jesus Christ, that's terrible.
Yes, it is. The 7800 is what Atari needed when the 5200 came out.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like, graphically speaking, because the 7800 is not even up to par with an NES, even though it came out after the NES. And I'll say this: I actually really fucking loved playing Ninja Golf on the 7800. Ninja Golf's fucking great. Don't at me. Like, what a great game. But, like, unfortunately, too little, too late.
Are you talking about Space Dungeon, by the way, which was on 5200? Was that game Space something that Rex Battenberg?
No, I don't think so.
There was 3 programmers for it: Rex Battenberg, Alan Merrill, and Eric Knopp. 3 people developed that game. Isn't that fucking crazy?
See if I can, like, and I know it was a Nolan Bushnell game or whatever.
Well, while you look that up, what do you think what is the most iconic Atari game? Like if you had to say
Pong,
like,
obviously Pong.
you think it's Pong?
Even though Pong is technically ripped off from someone else, but yes, it's Pong.
See, I would say like every time I think of the Atari, I think of Joust. Joust is the game that every time
I don't know if that's Atari. That might be Midway.
Is it? Let me. I'm gonna look. Maybe it might be.
I'm almost positive that is
Developers
a Midway game.
Williams Electronics and Atari Inc.
Yeah, and Atari Inc.
Yeah.
Huh.
Publishers was Williams Electronics, Atari Inc., Atari Soft, Atari Corporation.
Huh.
It's like the most Atari game. Joust. It came out on the Apple II as well. Holy shit. That's wild. But I think of that game, and then, obviously Pac-Man was on the Atari too at some point, I'm sure, but I don't think Pac-Man was an Atari game, was it?
Secret Quest, by the way, is the name of the game I'm thinking of.
Secret Quest.
Secret Quest.
Not
it is
Sword Quest.
Secret Quest.
Secret Quest.
Has a hell of a box art on it, by the way.
Well, now I got to. Well, you're going to say that, and I got to Google it. Arcades?
It was literally their answer to Zelda 1.
The Atari 2600 Secret Quest. It's a dude in a helmet and underwear fighting a dinosaur?
Some dinosaur-looking thing.
That is an amazing box art.
It looks like a ball sack, like with like weird stumpy legs and in a weird long neck. I don't know.
Oh, that's not a nipple. That's some sort of like thing. Like it's got like a red nipple. That's weird. They have a second one called Reinfested that has some wild box art. That's Dead Space right there. Oh my god, did Dead Space fucking rip off Secret Quest Reinfested? Google that, guys. Good.
Maybe.
Look at that fucking box art. Tell me that isn't just Dead Space.
Reinfested?
Yeah, Secret Quest Reinfested.
Yeah.
See here, I'll find it for here. That is a long image.
Can't believe. Well, 1990 was the last officially as a Midway release developed by Midway. Xenophobe. That was the last Atari game, 2600 game. Oh god.
Look at that. That's just Dead Space. That's just 80s Dead Space.
It is. It actually looks way cooler than the first one.
Well, yeah, it's because it's not a dude in Speedos fighting a fucking dinosaur.
So, like, what I should say, one of the most interesting things about this Atari 50th anniversary collection was that they talked about in the mid to late 80s, Atari's basically attempts to get back in the game industry because Nintendo took off, right? And I knew that they released like a $50 like different non-wood paneled looking Atari. I know that existed, but I didn't know that they actually tried to jump back into making games. And there was a sort of small resurgence of like people who came back and tried to make new games for the Atari 2600. And Secret Quest was one of those games that I was saying, where it was kind of their attempt to sort of do something closer to a Legend of Zelda game. Because honestly, like, the best, like the most known game is Pong, and I'd honestly argue probably one of the best games on the Atari is something like Adventure, even though Adventure looks like nothing.
I can't even picture Adventure.
It's and most people would call it the precursor to Zelda, right? Like,
yeah,
like it's the game that like kind of like started all that. And it's pretty good. I actually like it. I think it's fun. There's obviously like good ports of like Missile Command and Breakout. Those are really good Atari games, right? Tempest is great, but I don't think that was on Atari. I think that was only in arcades. So yeah, it's sort of an interesting history. But for me, kind of the most interesting, and I posed this question where I was asking like after we did our stream. I said, what's interesting to me, and maybe this is only interesting to me and no one else. You guys will let me know, I'm sure. What could have Atari done to win back favor with the Jaguar, or the Lynx, or anything else, because I remember very distinctly when the Jaguar came out, and there was this weird big stink because it's a 64-bit console. It really wasn't, you know, and like, oh, we're leapfrogging. We're gonna have all these bits of power. It's gonna be amazing. All this, like, and I didn't necessarily buy it, but they definitely had my attention,
Right.
or they had my curiosity. Had a lot of people's curiosity. And they're coming out with these bold claims and whatever. And it doesn't look like, and the system never looked like much anyways. But
It's a cool name.
yeah. And the thing was, is all the Jaguar ended up being was just more or less an Amiga 30 CD32 from Europe. They just kind of like took off the shelf parts from Amiga consoles from Europe, and then just, like, you know, Frankenstein them together to make the Jaguar. And obviously, like, that's a big problem with Atari as it was in the late 90s, and that's kind of one big reason the Jaguar kind of failed. But sit there and ask yourself, like, what could have Atari done in the mid 90s to compete with Sega and Nintendo? What would it have taken, you know, for them to be like a real true competitor? What was it? And here's where
get Microsoft or Apple to back you.
Well, yeah. Well, Apple was actually kind of in the dumps in the early 90s. It was the iMac,
but they were
yet.
looking. Apple was looking for any kind of area to pop.
They released the Pippin out here.
They did. That's true. No, but I do often think about, like, what if we lived in a world where Atari and Sega were still making consoles and competing with Microsoft?
Right. Yeah.
Sega, Nintendo, or Microsoft, Nintendo, and PlayStation. And I do genuinely think I wish there was still a Dreamcast, or you know, Nintendo's not really truly a third option, right, in the console game, because Nintendo doesn't really actually compete with the other two. They're sort of their own thing. You know, I would argue that, like, nobody really goes like, well, I can either get an Xbox or a Nintendo, and so I will only get a Nintendo, and I don't care about like, Nintendo's not really, like, it doesn't go after the same people, even, if that makes sense.
It's kind of true, and it's definitely been true at least since the Wii came out.
Yeah, so what would it look like if, like, Atari and Sega teamed up right now, and they were like, "Fuck it, we're releasing."
Yeah, well, now is a lost cause, honestly.
Now there's not a good option unless they found some sort of backing to go up. Like, who's going to go up against Microsoft? Sony's having a hard enough time going against Microsoft, and they're having to do, like, every trick in the book in court to try and make it so Microsoft doesn't dominate them in the next decade. You know, and that's not like saying, like, oh, Microsoft's just better. Microsoft has so much money, they cannot lose. They can fuck up for the next 3 decades and still come out on top.
Well, the argument would be that Microsoft is fucking up, because, like, the PS5 is outselling the Xbox right now.
Oh, sure, yeah, but I would even argue that the PS5 hasn't done anything yet. Not really. Like, God of War is maybe the first game that's
on PS4.
Yeah, but, like, if you think next gen, isn't God of War kind of the first game they would think next gen?
No, because it's on last gen, and it looks good and runs well. So
yeah, so I guess really what we're getting at is both of them are fucking this generation up, but one of them can afford to fuck this generation up.
Yeah. Well, Sony as a corporation, people won't believe us or understand us, but, like, if you looked at the entirety of the whole corporation, Sony's in trouble if the PlayStation starts slipping.
Right. Yeah, because it's their linchpin currently.
Yeah, if their branding for PlayStation falls out of favor, the way Xbox did because of the launch of the Xbox One, which I feel they're still feeling the effects of.
Right. Yeah.
If Sony has that goes into that dark phase, they're going to have a way harder time crawling out of it than Microsoft is.
Well, isn't it because Sony's a huge conglomerate too, right? They manufacture all sorts of electronics. They do all sorts of shit. But isn't there, like, currently something about, like, PlayStation is their most profitable sector now?
Yeah,
TVs used to be their most profitable.
It might be. I think it's the only division that's profitable anymore.
Right. Whereas Microsoft is like Xbox is tier 3 concern for them. Like they're like, Xbox is great and it's a prestige concern, like it's a prestige section of the company, but like it doesn't need to turn a profit for Microsoft to just be murdering it everywhere else. It's kind of like how everyone was like, yeah, you remember Microsoft phones, herder, and it's like, yeah, and it was a giant failure that they broke even on, and they're still one of the most dominant companies in the world. They can afford to fuck up far longer than even Nintendo could give them a run for their money because Nintendo has such a giant war chest. But
yeah,
even eventually, Nintendo would run out of
Nintendo
money.
will just slowly fade into obscurity. This is what would happen to Nintendo.
Yeah, but I do think it's kind of, we're in a time where if you could somehow launch a console as an alternative, one that competes in terms of like graphics, but then also you just have like a good backlog of games. Like it'd be weird to see like a Sega jump out, right? Sega has a brand still, but like say this is totally hypothetical. I realize there is no basis in reality for this, but Sega buys Konami's IP and then launches a console, and then we've got all the Sega IP and we've got all the Konami IP, and they're now Sega exclusives for the Sega, blow
Whatever.
you bot, whatever the fuck it's going to be called to get everybody's attention.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Is there a way that Atari does something similar, right? Where Atari comes out and they're like, fuck it, we're launching a new system. Is Atari the company that can go like, hey, we're doing purely old school style Atari games in a handheld game system that is meant to, like, it has just a super long battery life for these simple games, and it's fucking price point that is cheap enough that you're willing to just carry a Game Boy sized.
Yeah, and
system,
here's the thing I'll say with Atari, no.
Well, they don't have enough.
If we're talking about now, I'm going to say this: Atari doesn't have any leg to stand on because,
right? Yeah,
most of Atari, pretty much all, I don't want to say all, but like let's call it like 90+% of Atari's output after the crash in 1983 is not good.
yeah, it's hot garbage.
Like some of it is like decent at best, right? Like almost nothing they put out, like that Atari made on the Jaguar was good, like at all. The Lynx had some interesting things, but a lot of the Lynx stuff isn't good either. And again, you go to the 7800, 5200, most of that stuff is either just better ports of old 2600 games. There's a couple of interesting stuff. There's some interesting things in there. Again, I stand Ninja Golf. I think you can make an amazing Ninja Golf game now if like you got like Camelot or Clap Hands, who make Hot Shots Golf,
Yeah,
Mario Golf. Get them to do the golf portion, and then get Soleil, who's all ex-Team Ninja developers who did Ninja Gaiden, have them do all the action stuff in between. It'd be fucking great. I think this would be.
How do I
fantastic.
not remember this game? Because this sounds.
Nobody saw it because nobody had a 7800. Nobody even knows what a 7800 is.
You play golf, but then in between playing golf, you fight like a ninja.
You take a you take a shot towards the hole, right? And then after you've hit your shot, it goes into a side scroller level, and you run on left to right to get to where your ball is, and you fight all these animals on the way. And if you get in the sand trap, you're gonna have to fight giant cobras. If it goes in the water, you still play. You have to go into the water and you punch sharks and throw shurikens at sharks until you get to your ball and hit it out of the water.
How much cocaine were these guys doing where they can't? Genius. It sounds amazing. It sounds like I'm in. But so much cocaine, right?
I love it.
That sounds like a coke-fueled fucking nightmare.
I don't know how this happened. The box art's amazing. There's like this guy, they got like a Party City costume and put a golf caddy on his back, and he's holding a ninja sword, and there's like some nunchucks falling off this thing, and then there's this drawn Photoshop like golf course behind him. It's fucking glorious.
This is the most insane sounding game.
It's one of my favorite games on the collection is Ninja Golf.
It sounds like a fucking fever dream, right? Like if you came to me and you were like, I need seed money to make my dream game, and then you described that to me, I'd stop talking to you. I'd assume you're doing heavy drugs. Like, I'd assume you're so deep into heavy drugs that I couldn't save you. I wouldn't even try.
How does any of this sound bad though?
It doesn't sound bad. It sounds fucking crazy.
There's a storyline and everything too about like how this is your final trial to become a ninja master. So you must play 9 rounds of ninja golf.
Is he a Scottish ninja?
I guess he's playing golf.
Like, can that be a thing? What the fuck? Weird. I'm into it, but it is weird. And when does the
Fucking
movie
great.
version come out?
Right? It's fucking great. Love ninja golf.
Wild.
But yeah, like for the most part, I mean, I'd say Ninja Golf to me was probably the last game Atari Corporation as was Atari Corporation they ever released. Or at least that's on that collection. At least I'd say that's the best game. Maybe there's probably some decent stuff. It's funny they have like 3 or 4 Lynx games and they're crap.
I think because they couldn't. Links.
I think because they couldn't get the license for like Blue Lightning and stuff like that.
I'm trying to think of like various other games that I played. I mean, they had a Kroll game, which I remember being vaguely based on the movie, right? Yeah, it's based on it's based on the science fiction movie Kroll. Now, anybody that didn't see Kroll, I mean, you should do yourself a favor and just see that. I think it was directed by Peter Yates.
Nice.
Yes, it is directed by Peter Yates.
You were like, is it David Yates who makes all the Harry Potter movies?
You know, he might have been. He died in like 2011. Maybe he was David Yates' father.
Maybe.
But yeah, he's Kroll's a fucking. I mean, that's just wow. Peter Yates, for anybody that's wondering, he did Bullet. He did the Saint TV show. Anybody who doesn't know what Bullet is, that's Steve McQueen. It's the most famous car chase in movie history.
The one that had the camera like on the hood of the car.
Yeah, they're doing a car chase through San Francisco, and it was like one of the most exciting car chases they had ever done.
I think we had to watch that in film class.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
I'm almost sure, but it wasn't the whole movie. I think it was just the chase. They had to do like dissect it or some shit.
That's fucking upsetting, but the whole movie's good. It's Steve McQueen being Steve McQueen. But yeah, that's Peter Yates, and he did Kroll, and Kroll is just fucking. It's wild. I actually don't know who it stars. Let me see. Kenneth Marshall. What the fuck else did he ever do? He's age 72. Oh, he did quite a bit.
Your mom in the 70s. That's what he did.
Fuck you. My mom is a saint. She wouldn't do Kenneth Marshall who starred in Kroll. Yeah, Kroll's fucking, I don't know. There's like a weird weapon that's like a boomerang knife thing.
I think I've only heard about it from Red Letter Media. Best of the worst or something.
Yeah, it's not great. But they had a game on that, and I feel like you remember that old store Game World? They had a copy of Kroll for the Atari.
That makes sense.
You know, no one ever bought it because no one knows what Kroll is. Is it a comedy? Is it fantasy? Is it science fiction?
80 schlock is what it is.
It's fucking wild. It is. It's like Ninja Golf. It's the Ninja Golf of movies, but not good.
It's like Ice Pirates.
Ice Pirates, holy shit. What would the Atari system be named if they came out with an Atari now that we got?
I think they should stick to the cats. I think that, I think there's Atari Snow, like, leopard or something, or Snow Leopard, or
isn't that also what Apple did for its OSs? They did Tiger.
It did.
And Snow
yeah.
Leopard.
Well, fuck them. They don't know
the
cats.
Atari Tiger.
The Atari, Atari Tiger. Or
the Atari Tiger would be cool. The Atari House Cat. The most dangerous of all cats.
The Turkish Angora. House cat Atari.
The Atari Tiger would be sick as fuck. But would it be a handheld or would it be like a mini PC?
Well, you're talking about now. And I actually asked the question, not now. What did Atari need to do in the 90s, in 93? What did it need to do to compete with to save itself, to compete with Super Nintendo and Genesis at the time? In the onslaught of all the other crappy systems coming out around that time. Because now there's no. I'm just going to say this right now. There is no future or way for Atari to come back now. It
No, we
can't.
got to believe.
They would have to buy a major developer publisher. Like they'd have to buy, like a Namco.
They'd have to
buy
get
EA.
They'd have to get seed money to start publishing first, long before they could ever do another.
Yeah, they're not coming back because
not
I'm gonna be brutal, right? I'm just gonna make this real brutal right now. Atari doesn't come back on anything of its own making, of its own IPs. Atari has no brand recognition. Its games are anything that's post 1983 sucks. Like not Ninja Golf, but you get what I'm saying. Like,
but
there's
if they
nothing.
Launched, if they did a new system and they launched with brand new versions of Ninja Golf, Secret Quest, the second one, the one that's
if you make Ninja Golf the way I told you to make it with specific developers, maybe.
Yeah. If they launched like that and they launched themselves as we're the fun couch console. We're the Wii of this generation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? All we do is make shit that you're going to have fun, maybe high or drunk, but you're going to have fun with your friends at a party or in your dorm. They do what the Switch wants to be, what the Switch advertises itself to do. If they do that, you're saying Ninja Golf's the way? And not an updated chess?
If you have Clap Hands or Camelot do the golfing and someone like Salil doing the in-between action sequences, yes.
You play that game day one.
I play that game day one. I play that game day zero. I'll be promoting that game.
Amazing.
But yeah, so now I think is a lost cause. But like, what do you do in '93, right? Like when SNES is in its peak, in the middle of its peak, years, its prime years, its halcyon days of Genesis and Super NES. What do you do as Atari coming in like they did? Because they thought we'll make a 64. They thought that we're just going to come in, we're going to have the most power. We're even lying about the power, but we're going to come in and say we're so much more powerful than everyone else. Look how great we are. Buy our system. We're the best. And it doesn't translate to much. You had a good Doom port. You had to go to Wolfenstein port. But like,
right. Well, where I think they dropped the ball actually isn't necessarily, they should have pivoted to doing collections for handheld games. Because they still, at that time, it was the early 90s, but they still had a reputation for making those really great arcade games. Yeah. But those arcade games would have run on a Game Boy.
Yeah.
And at the time, Game Boy was really kind of the major competition.
And they had the Lynx in it, and it kind of fizzled and burned real hard. The Lynx actually came out right before the Game Boy. But it's pretty obvious why the Lynx failed, because it was $180 at launch and Game Boy was $80. It was like 100, literally 80s money, or I'm sorry, 90s money, 89. But it's like it was literally $100 to $120 more expensive than a Game Boy. Why did it? I wonder why it failed.
Oof, wow. No, I honestly I don't think there was any way to save it. One, because we know that Atari was run purely on cocaine and jacuzzi parties.
It's absolutely true.
It is 100%.
If anyone thinks you're just sort of throwing that out there, no, look it up.
Yeah, no, they really truly were like the most whacked out of their minds ever. Which is how you get fucking Secret Quest and
Ninja funny. I said this about Steve Jobs because Steve Jobs worked at Atari Corporation when it was in its prime. And everyone thought I was like Steve and Kenny Max. They probably all thought I was bullshitting about this. Where I said, yeah, he got put on the night shift because nobody wanted to work with him because he smelled.
Steve Jobs, really?
Yeah.
No shit.
Because apparently he didn't bathe.
Well, that's gross. Explains a lot about the turtlenecks and mom jeans, though, doesn't it?
That is the story of Steve Jobs' time at Atari. It was just like no one wanted to work with him because he always stank.
And everybody else was fucking each other, so they were just like, I don't want to be around the stinky dude. I want to get into a jacuzzi and fuck the CEO. Because they did not have sexual harassment policies back then. Those fucking weirdos. Jesus.
This was an early YoVideogames podcast. We talked about this. And the thing is like most of the women, they don't have for them, it was like, it's not, they don't, it wasn't this thing where like, oh, we were like being super mistreated. Like, they're like, yeah, we had a good time.
Yeah, no, it's weird. Reading a lot of interviews and shit.
Yeah, a lot of them were just kind of like, yeah, we just fooled around in jacuzzi tubs on the job. And it's like, because as fucked up as that kind of work culture is, it wasn't actually this weird. There was a power dynamic, but there wasn't as much of a power dynamic as, say, like a Harvey Weinstein situation, right? It wasn't like you're going to do this for me if you want to be a star. It's just kind of like,
Right. Yeah.
hey, we're making money, you're making money. Hey, you want to get in the tub? Yeah.
And who knows if this is just like the gleam of time passing, like they remember it less fucky than it was. But it is weird to read their statements on it, and you're just like, oh, they don't give a fuck at all. They were really just partying. It sounds like everybody was just in for an orgy at Atari. That's imagine if you like were a serious game developer for serious games. I'm Neil Druckmann. I'm gonna make fucking
Yeah.
Last of Us, and you come in and just everybody's fucking each other, and you're just like, wait, guys, I want to make things that make people cry, and they're like, cry. I want to see titties. I want to do cocaine. I want to do blow off of that girl's
Neil, calm the fuck down. Come here, snort this line off this intern's boobs.
Neil, get in the jacuzzi. You can't wear pants in the jacuzzi. You can't be serious in the jacuzzi. Jesus Christ! Every time you read about Atari, it's just one giant fucking like sexual harassment panda.
And part of me kind of wonders if, like, okay, here's a weird thought here where that I was kind of having the whole night we were playing these Atari games, and I'm just kind of like wondering, like, maybe they just got to their fuck you money period. Maybe they were just like, maybe they just didn't care. Like,
they were
for
also
them,
young, right?
Yeah. So part of me kind of thinks like, it's kind of like, man, why did they never have because the thing is, they never had the sort of ambition or drive that like seemingly Nintendo and Sega picked up for in the 80s and ran with it. And like, maybe they didn't need to. They I'm not saying they didn't work hard, because like, the whatever weeks or months they did to make their initial big hits, they absolutely cranked it out, burn the midnight oil to make their early successes. I don't want to take away shit like that, right? But on the other hand, they had their success and they were just kind of living their best life.
Right.
And I don't necessarily think that's even a problem. It's not something to even be upset with them about. Like, oh, how come you didn't like further the drive of this industry? And I'm like, bro, I fucking became a millionaire, in my 20s and was having jacuzzi parties, for work. Get off my nuts.
We're at the end, but you know what we should do for the fucking bonus content that we record tonight? We should just do a Where Are They Now? For those
Nolan Bushnell, he's had like a series of like, start and stops, businesses. Like, he started Chuck E. Cheese after Atari.
Holy shit.
And then
that makes sense.
Yeah, and then he tried in the early 2000s to make it was called like start with a W, like forget what it is. It's like a weird name. It was a restaurant for adults, and they had little laptops on the table you could play games on. Red Robin tried to do this too. Like, he tried to do that, but like it didn't really catch on or whatever for whatever reason. I actually thought it was a good idea. He basically went into Nolan Bushnell literally kind of like jumped the gun on barcades.
He was just like, I'm an entrepreneur.
I mean, he's in the pictures of him, even in his old age, he's sitting there with like smoking a pipe in a jacuzzi. And he's just kind of like,
man really loves jacuzzi.
He does, and good for him. But I think getting back to I think the main crux sort of all of this was kind of like, it was interesting to see, obviously, like the boomer days, right, of the boomer games,
right?
But I don't think Atari ever really moved beyond that. And I think that's kind of what kind of sort of led to the crash. And that's why I said, like, when they came back in the early 90s and tried to revitalize themselves, and it's like, what could they have done? And to me, they needed to get, in the early 90s, if you wanted to be competitive in the gaming market, in console gaming space, you needed to get Japan on your side.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what Atari did not have. And I think that's ultimately what sort of killed them was just the fact that, you needed, Japan was kind of running the show at that point.
Well, I think also Atari was making games that were meant to be quick distractions in an arcade. Like, I don't even for their console games and stuff, I don't think they were thinking outside of the arcade mentality, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Japan and Japanese developers, they were making full blown,
stories and stuff.
Story driven. I mean, we talk about stories back then not making any sense, right? Today, narrative in games is incredible. But even fucking 10 years ago, necessarily, most games, the narrative was whatever the fuck fit the gameplay hook.
Yeah.
20 years ago, playing a game for the story was sort of silly. Not that you couldn't do it. It was just like the story was written to fit whatever the fuck needed
Absolutely.
to be. And that's why they were nonsensical. Look at the Resident Evil franchise, how nonsensical that shit is to suit whatever. And I love it.
And they've even talked about how like they originally like, well, what was the original plan? It was going to be ghosts and shit. And why did it turn into this? Because this is just like this is what the gameplay was going to play like. So we just sort of fit the narrative to be what the game is that we have.
And Atari never even survived to the 3D crash. All those companies that just couldn't get their head around 3D. And I think what happened to them,
you could argue that the Jaguar was kind of like trying to be 3D and sort of like,
try.
It died as 3D was becoming online, basically.
Yeah, but that could be what was happening. I think really what it was they fundamentally didn't understand how the audience had changed. Joust is great fun, right? But nobody gives a fuck about Joust 6, right? Nobody's,
and you don't want to pay $60 for Joust,
right?
In 1999 or 1993.
I think really the way they could have survived is if they would have continued. If instead of making home consoles, they would have said, "Okay, well, home consoles isn't going to be our thing. We're really good at making arcade," because arcades survived for another 10 to 15 years. Really, they did well for another 10 to 15 years there, and they could have. They could have built
all Atari really needed to do, I think, is what you're saying. They probably should have kept on the arcade scene, and then if they could have survived to the dawn of the iPhone era, I think Atari would have thrived. I think Atari
might have murdered it.
Yeah. As we know, Atari as a corporation, the games they made, they actually would have fucking killed it in the mobile sector if they had survived that long.
Yeah, what they would have had to make it to 2005. 2005.
Well, 5 is when the iPhone came out, but you're right. 2006 would be like when enough people had an iPhone to make it worthwhile. So yes, 2006.
Rough 13 years for them. Would have been rough.
Well, yeah. Well, and I think one other thing that maybe, so why didn't Atari have the drive? Why didn't they? Here's the thing: Atari was making going back to these jacuzzi parties and stuff. They were not actually a huge corporation, and they made a lot of money, and people were kind of paid well. Especially if you actually made the game, right? Here's the thing: Miyamoto is, I feel, very much like an Atari era programmer, and I do think he's a bit of a Geppetto. I think he is a bit of a man at a time. And I love the guy, but like, he becomes obsessed with little gimmicks and thinks the gimmicks are going to, and it's like he has like this very old school arcade mentality to his design philosophy. But Miyamoto is also someone who kind of was forced into doing narrative driven stuff, like with Ocarina of Time, his last directed game.
Right.
But here's the thing that's different about Miyamoto than Nolan Bushnell or some of these others. Miyamoto didn't get rich for making Donkey Kong.
Right. He was a salary man.
He made Nintendo rich. Now he's like head of the company. Hell, he was joint president for a short amount of time even. But Miyamoto was not having jacuzzi parties in 1982 after Donkey Kong 1 was a huge success.
Right.
So
actually, isn't there a weird thing about Atari being partial developers of Donkey Kong? They developed the arcade version or something.
They developed their Atari 2600 version of it.
Yeah, they're listed as developers of Donkey Kong in 1981.
It's not. I mean, they didn't make the game, but it's like
they did a port to the Atari 2600.
They did some ports and stuff. Yes.
Wild.
Pretty wild, right? So, that's this kind of thing. Is that like even up to 1992, 91. There was this guy, Dylan Cuthbert, who I think he was European, might have been American, English, Western developer, and he lived in Japan and he worked at Nintendo, right? And he made Star Fox, the original Star Fox with Miyamoto and stuff. And the reason was because he was just a better programmer than anyone there. But he would tell, there's stories from him. I think it's him, might be someone else. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think it's pretty sure it was Dylan Cuthbert saying like, with Star Fox was made in like, the basement level or whatever. at Nintendo's headquarters, and Miyamoto would come down to take, check on the progress of the game every day, but he was really coming down just to get away from the rest of the company and have a smoke break. And they called him Siggy Shiggy, because he would just come down and they'd be in this basement level development office, and he'd come down and he'd just be smoking and looking and standing over their backs, watching them make the game, and giving suggestions. Like, he wasn't doing nothing; he was literally helping develop the game.
But he was escaping the politics, and
he was escaping the politics upstairs and just having a cigarette while doing it, the whole time.
Fuck yeah, man!
Just like, and I'm like, see, that's the thing, and that's 10, 12 years after Miyamoto's already made the company fucking rich.
Right.
And he's still sitting there like escaping politics to come have a cigarette break while working on another game in the basement. So,
yeah, he did all right for himself, but he definitely wasn't making fuck you money and having jacuzzi parties. And
yeah, he rode his bike to work to apparently an absurd amount of time before the company basically told him, you can't do this. You're way too well known and shit. Like, we will drive you to work. I mean,
smoking a cigarette and riding a bike at the same time.
I don't know if he did that, but he probably did.
He probably did. There was that guy, to prove a point for some argument in China, he ran a marathon while chain smoking. Yeah, he just wanted to prove a point. It's all bullshit. It doesn't affect your lungs. And so he just ran a marathon while chain smoking. Google that shit. It's a wild story.
But yeah, I think really that's probably like a big reason too why Atari kind of just never could come back, even when people did kind of want to try to bring it back, because it's like they didn't have the ambition because they actually made the money.
Right.
And is that necessarily a bad thing? Not really. Because I think there's always going to be those entrepreneurial people. Like, you see it with the indies right now. People come out and make incredible new experiences on the indie platforms and stuff or whatever. I don't think it would be a detrimental, I feel like as I'm saying this, it sounds like I'm being detrimental to the game industry, saying like, if everyone got paid a lot of money for their successes, they wouldn't go on to create bigger, better games. And I'm like, no.
Devs should get paid better. Probably.
Yeah, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that, like, maybe the reason these people who made Asteroids and Pong and whatever, they got immediate early success, and then they basically just coke and hookers.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that might have had just a thing to do with it. And it's just like, why do you? Because I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think we have to imagine ourselves. Take ourselves back to those shag carpets in the dens in the house with the wood panel everything, and think about this. Does someone living in the 70s really sit there making something like Joust or Asteroids and go, I'm going to make Last of Us someday?
No, right. They're just thinking about how to get the smell of Badussy out of their carpet.
Right, exactly.
And you can't. You can't out of shag carpeting. You just can't.
So yeah, I think for them, they're just kind of like, we were like, for them, it was maybe, I think for them, it was something to tinker with on the side, and it made them rich. And they probably never sat there and thought, I need to make a sad dad game that's going to make people fucking cry.
Well, they also probably didn't look at video games as art at the time.
They didn't. And that's, I think that's kind of what I'm getting at, is just kind of like, well, I think for a lot of them, it was more or less just like, make something cool, see if you can make some money off it. And if you can, great.
Right. It's an interesting evolution of game development. Is sort of similar how TV developed, right? TV didn't really think about themselves as art. They thought of themselves as like content production. But like today, you would say like there are TV shows that are, many TV shows are more art than films,
right? Like The Wire and The Sopranos, right? Like when TV first came out, people making TV content probably could never would have dreamed of making something like The Wire or The Sopranos.
Right. Yeah, they made Star Trek, and Star Trek was fucking great, but it wasn't necessarily like, they weren't trying to, like, I don't know, teach you something deep and dirty about the city of Baltimore. Like, they don't want you to learn about the sad dad, running. Yeah.
So
running down.
Yeah. Atari is actually, I don't know. It's a very interesting company to me, because it is homegrown American, from California. And it just sort of like just popped, right? And it popped really even before our times. And then they tried to come back in the 90s, and it was just kind of a disaster. And it's kind of like, well, what could Atari have? What would it have? What it would look like in this world if they came back? How could they have come back? Kind of thing. And why didn't they come back? Why didn't they? Why weren't they more competitive? And then I
I don't
guess
think
this.
they also didn't live in a time where there was like unlimited VC money, right? In the last 20
Mm,
years, like everybody was just throwing fucking money at any fucking Silicon Valley idea they could possibly find. You know, the
mm,
amount of dumb fucking ideas that I got paid to make commercials for, you're just like, well, you know, like you're like that just didn't exist at that time. At that time, Atari had to sell things to make money. Um, you know, and you'd think that's true today. Well, it is it's true now today for the first time in many, many years. And you see a lot of companies going to the shitter. But as a final thought, do you are we worse off because Atari doesn't exist?
that's actually a good. Yeah, that's a good question. Is the game industry better or worse for Atari? Kind of like going down like the like a Zeppelin.
I'm gonna argue better. I actually am gonna argue we are better off not having a lingering, dragging on Atari. I do think that because Atari went down in flames the time it did, Japan became dominant in the games they were making, and there was probably a 10-year period there where nobody took any Western games seriously at all. Um, but I do think it is something that inspired a lot of the people we would say now are really dominant Western developers or game directors. I think that had Atari stayed dominant in the United States and those style of games, we might not have like a God of War today. We might not have a God of War narrative driven. We may
Mhm.
still be doing that same shit. Because if Atari stayed dominant and stayed making money, nobody ever would have thought to make a narrative driven game. We'd have Joust 16. Because that's kind of how American commercial market works, right? We're working on the next Avengers 8,
Yeah, like we'll look at
Fast
Activision's
9.
whole operation.
Right, yeah, we're on
Run
the
it into the
20th
ground.
Call of Duty. Yeah,
Yeah, run it into the ground.
until it makes not even a single fucking cent more. So I would argue that we are better off that they had that bomb explode, that they got fucked that way. But am I sad that we missed out on maybe another console staying in the mix? Always yes. I would like another console. I would like competition.
Yeah, and I think that goes to you like wanting like you. It would be better if it was like a bigger competition for Nintendo Sega. There, like
Right.
what if
Yeah.
we had something that was like on the level of the three consoles we have now, where like they're all really competing for space, whereas like Nintendo kind of like it was Nintendo and Sega for a little while. Sega got a little bit ahead, and then Nintendo went, "Nah, fuck you," and then
Yeah.
and then Sony was like, "Fuck all you, fuck you both," and then you
And
know,
then Microsoft came on the scene and did fucking great for the first 8 years and not so great after that. They're just
yeah.
lingering.
But yeah, I have to echo. I'll have to like I don't want, and then I'll say this. Yes, Atari walked so that the rest of the game industry could run, but I think Atari's history shows exactly why it's good to let things die. Like it was good to let the whole industry, the whole home market console industry, it was good to let it burn and die because it made that the next different someone else, not Atari, someone completely outside of that ecosystem come in with a new, better, more ambitious idea and sort of rebuild it. Now there's all kinds of issues sort of with how that happened. Nintendo was smart and that they basically went into the toy aisle rather than the home electronics aisle,
Right.
and that kind of created issues where people still to this day think video games are kid fair. It led to issues with the rating creation of the ratings board, and Nintendo almost stagnated the industry themselves by never wanting it to be anything more than all ages kind of thing. I'm talking about like the trials in the 90s.
Right. Yeah.
There is all kinds of issues there, but going back to Atari's side of this story, I think it really shows how sometimes like there should never be something too big to fail. Like, I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
I think if you're bad if you're bad at running your business, you don't get to walk away. Like,
Yes,
if I'm
Sega. Sorry.
if I miss a if I miss a payment, for rent, my landlord's not going to be some fucking, like, magnanimous, philanthropic, charity driven. Oh, you'll get it to me when you get to. No, my
I'll
ass is going
forgive
to be
you
out on
this
the
time.
street.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, no, if I don't meet my ends, I don't get to, live where, I don't get to live in a house or an apartment or whatever, right? And I think Atari wasn't great at their job by the early 80s, and they crashed and burned, and it was good because you needed new fresh blood. You needed someone else to come in and sort of like revitalize the industry rather than just sort of fail upwards.
In closing, Atari is the perfect example of fucking around, and then they found out, and they were literally fucking around, like it's in jacuzzis with cocaine.
Yep, and it's better. I think it's
It
better
is, yeah.
overall. I think things played out well. Not everything was, again, not everything was smooth. Not everything went great. Not everything was the perfect call to make, but I think overall this was the better timeline than having this zombie of Atari sort of limp along, or God forbid, like be still the number one game in town, and we're playing Joust 16, or Breakout 21.
I'd be fucking dominant. At
Breakout's
Joust 16.
great, but it's kind of like, I don't want the whole game industry to be nothing but Breakout and Tempest and Pong.
That's true. We'd be on Pong 25th anniversary, but
We've on Pong's 50th anniversary, my friend.
God damn it, so long ago. We went really long. So on that note, we hope you enjoyed this trek through the 70s. We kind of did all things 70s. We talked about Spielberg and Lucas. We talked about jacuzzi parties and shag carpeting and all the wonderful smells that got stuck into there.
Yeah.
Ugh. We talked about being able to smoke in a basement. That doesn't exist anymore. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
If you had a favorite Atari game, especially one we didn't talk about, or
Yeah, what is your favorite Atari game?
apparently it's fucking Ninja Golf.
Hell yes.
Hit us up on Twitter. Hit us up on YouTube. Hit us up on all the things. But we will catch you next time. We have patrons and producers to thank. Our producers for this episode are Scrunami, Croy35, Hyperviper89, Ziggy Z, and Online Persona. Thank you, dudes, and we will catch you next time.
Later, dudes.